The big obstacle is they just don't know where to begin. But by starting at the lower level, what I call the delegation pyramid, priority pyramid, the lowest level, like building a house, you start on the ground, the foundation. You get time, you get energy and resources back on your calendar.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?
Hi everyone, I'm Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today I'm here with Justin Lund, an entrepreneur who helps founders break through their capacity ceiling, the invisible wall where hustle stops working and freedom feels out of reach. So I feel we're going to talk a lot about mindset today, Justin, and I'm super excited about that. So first, thank you for coming on the show. Thanks for taking the time out to be here today. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me, Jason. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Can we start with your story, your background, sort of tell us a bit about yourself, and then we'll dive in from there?
Yeah, sure. So I got into a lot of mindset and entrepreneurial. I feel like those are aligned. You have to always work on your mindset if you're an entrepreneur, I think.
Yep.
Because
Agreed.
the world just keeps kicking you over and over again with different challenges.
Yes.
So both of those lanes feel like they're aligned in my mind. And that started in my life at a really young age. I think it was my older brother who brought in an Tony Robbins, back then he was Anthony Robbins more, cassette tape series. It was like this big, Personal Power. That was it.
Okay.
And I really got into that. I thought it was really cool that he let me listen to it. And I was like 8, I was young, I was little. And I just thought it was really neat. This guy was just so full of passion and energy and getting people fired up, flying into events in his helicopter. And I thought, wow, that seems like that's a pretty cool way to live. Yeah. So that may have planted a seed at a really young age to just kind of pursue something to be a bit of my own boss, seeing the contrast of how other people had to answer to their bosses. I thought that may be cool to just do something on my own. Then later in life, I got into sales to put myself through college. And it was in that sales environment that those psychological and mindset foundations really came in handy. I'd get into sales conversations, sales pitch, and really just tried to model my presentation or pitch after what I'd heard, read over and over again and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So that was useful and helpful. What wasn't helpful there was the environment where there was a lot of drug abuse of prescription medications taking place in that environment. So I fell into that world and became addicted to painkillers and had to fight through that for a few years. Trying to do it on my own dozens and dozens of times. I just kind of continued to get worse off every time I would try, and then had some trouble and run-ins with the law, which kind of forced and compelled me to take it up a notch. And I went into a rehab facility, which was the scariest thing I've ever done at the time, but the best thing in hindsight that had ever happened to me. Being able to really cement these psychological and emotional frameworks to me personally, not just a book on my nightstand, I really got diving into my psychology on a pretty intense basis for 6 weeks. That's all we did, all day, and there's no distractions. And it was just a really focused thing. And so that was a real catalyst and a turning point in my life. I had 2 kids at the time, so I had something really to fight for and to work towards. And, that was just a real unlock and a transformative moment for me when I came out of that facility and realized how much of my existence and bandwidth, just mentally and emotionally, and just everything to keep that whole thing going, the addiction and the lies and the alter ego and lifestyle that I was trying to keep off of most people's radar. And I was able to pour that into just being more healthy, being more productive. And I started a business, and within the next year and a half or so, got it up to 7 figures. And another 2 years later, it was brushing up against 9 figures. Rapid growth really just took off. And I just thought, man, it was really cool to see what I had been kind of diverting into this addiction, into this area, this dark side of my life. And when I was able to put it back into and through the frameworks and the filters that were constructive and positive, and you learn things like, stimulus, response. There's a gap here in the middle that I can choose what I do, that it's not just conditioned, and how to rewire and recondition those responses based on the stimulus, on the outcome that I want to pull in towards me. And I just really tried to apply those in many different areas of life and started to unlock some really cool, fun opportunities.
Yeah. I mean, thank you. And thank you for sharing that. I think, interestingly, one of the kind of cool things about doing this podcast is I mean, one, that people share a lot of personal information, which I feel very fortunate that happens. But also there's a continuing theme where something happens. It's either some very strong negative response or negative place to be in that people want to turn things around from, and sort of use that as a launching spot. Or it can be something, positive as well. A birth of a child, maybe it's a combination of them. This often seems to be a thing that goes along with, starting that rise, if you will, that sort of rocket ship ride up to, sort of significant levels of success. When you were going through all of that, I think the point you made about shifting where the energy was going is actually probably a really, I would say, really pointed observation of kind of what addiction does to people. Like there's a job, there's work that goes along with kind of maintaining, that people talk about functional alcoholics, functional addicts, where it's like you can actually be very high achieving and still like having and part of your high achieving is the actual like ability to maintain that addiction and still function at a high level. What sort of things did you do? Then you come from that and you start this business. I don't know if you want to tell us kind of what the business was, but sure, just a little bit about that journey and how you, maybe some of the tools you used to shift your focus and your energy to, I'm sure there are people that'll listen to this and have, be in similar places in their lives.
Are you planning a remodel or construction project? Overwhelmed by the process? Over budget? Extended timelines? Strained relationships? We are all too familiar. At Lark Construction Services, we help homeowners and business owners take control of their construction journey, from reviewing bids and contracts to catching red flags before they become costly mistakes. Our Clarity Audit is a one-on-one expert review of your plans, estimates, or current progress, giving you the peace of mind and a defined action plan to move forward with confidence. Don't let confusion lead to costly errors. Visit larkconstruction.com and schedule your free call today. Lark Construction Services, saving you time, money, and stress.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things to walk back from that, I think, I've heard that functional alcoholic or addict term thrown around a lot. And one of the things that I feel like my journey has kind of showed me and can, hopefully I can help convey that message to others that might be in that bucket of functional whatever, is the amount of energy that's going in to maintain that functionality. Like if you can and unlock that and get rid of it. And I just remember the fear that I had going into rehab. Like I'd tried dozens of times to quit this insidious toxic substance on my own. And I would try to coordinate things with my wife leaving town because I was trying to keep it all from her. She knew there was something weird going on, but I would just not be forthcoming or honest.
So she didn't know?
No, not up until I was arrested now. So as I'm trying to kind of weave through that process, knowing that I want to be done with this is not a healthy outcome. This is not a healthy behavior. I would try to encourage her to leave for 4 or 5 days. Because when you try to detox off of that stuff, I mean, it's not like just a little bump in the road. It's
Right.
You're down and out, right? You're
Yeah.
shaking, sweating. It's terrible. And so I knew I couldn't do that in front of her. So every time there was something that was coming, like, I might go see my aunt in Washington. I'm like, yeah, why don't you go? Take the kids. Take a week. Go ahead.
Yeah.
And I would like buck up. I'm ready. I'm going to do it this time. And I'd get all the way until the day she was coming home and just go through the worst of the physical misery part of it. But I was just trying to white knuckle and do it on my own. And that, like, all those cycles of attempting to do it, like, the fear of going into rehab, I just thought my whole world was going to crumble and collapse, and that my wife would leave. I'd lose my kids. I'd lose all my, anything. And if I could help share that, what it was actually like with people that may be in a similar circumstance, like, I want to go back every year. I wish I could. I think that would be, I just want to just kind of re-dive into me and figure out, okay, what am I doing that's wrong now? Because I know I'm doing some wrong stuff. I know we all have stupid behaviors and these little behaviors that stack up and they add up. And then all of a sudden, like you said, Jason, they start taking away the amount of time and energy that we put in to maintain that version of ourselves is often outside of our awareness. So we don't actually realize just how many of the thoughts on a day-to-day basis are consumed by this thing that might be our functional alcoholism or whatever it is, and there's a lot of things that it could be. So it's always a process, I think, in life of just trying to peel back some of those layers and get into, what's going on and how can I do a little course correction and get back onto a better track. And so that's one message that I'm hoping that I can convey to people everywhere is, if it's something you're struggling with, like, check it out. It's not, all the fears that I had were they were out in left field. It wasn't real. And I do think, back to your point about the dip before the rise, is I've heard that said. I think it was a Wayne Dyer book that I read once, where he was talking about, in order to get the momentum you need for the rise, you kind of got to take a dip and then you can push up. Yeah. Because some of our stubborn humanity traits are that, when we hit a little bit of a low, then we have more momentum and more desire and more stick-to-itiveness to actually go forward and push through some of those old barriers or those capacity ceilings that we've faced before.
Yeah. Yeah. It is an interesting thought that, we almost need to hit some sort of rock bottom, if you will, to bounce back up. Who knows? I guess probably not everybody does, but it seems to be what happens a lot. But I think conversations like this and you sharing your story, maybe that helps someone not get all the way to the bottom, and they think, this is, yeah, right. I would imagine, you mentioned the environment of sales, and I think that there are certain, career paths, positions, whatever you want to call it, where it's like, there's almost an expectation of, you go out and party a lot. It's like, it's meant to be kind of a social, and sales is one of them. I've have friends from the restaurant industry that very, very similar, like, that's just how it is.
Correct.
And I think that's, sort of an interesting, it's a way to, I guess, hide. You're like, oh, this is just what we do in this environment. And so, people that are in that and don't like how it's making them feel, and how, they can hear your story and hopefully recognize that, sort of there can be changes made. When you, one of the things, you mentioned that the energy, the time and the energy, and it's interesting when you make a life shift in some capacity. And my example here, I would say, is like when we had kids. I think back and I think, what was I doing with all that time? Like, I think about it, I'm like, what was I really doing with, it's like, now we have kids, we have multiple businesses. I'm like, what were we doing? Did we just watch TV all the time? Like, I don't know. It would like, but I think we underestimate, the point being, I think we underestimate like how much time we actually have to and energy to put towards something that's meaningful. So if whether that's business or family or whatever, like we spend a lot of time as humans just wasting time and like that's a big realization that I've had that I if I could go back and and recognize that a little bit earlier, that would be really great. But what is how do you structure your life now, and when you're talking to clients and things like that, like how do you look at that perspective? It's like, okay, here's if you can escape from addiction, whatever, and you can actually shift and focus your energy and time to something a bit more productive. Where should people start? I guess what's the, aside from realization, which I think is probably the first place, is realize like, hey, I'm wasting a lot of time, but like, what do we do, practically to make that shift?
I love your example of kids because they're a forcing function, right? I mean, you have no choice. And then all of a sudden, if you do reflect, which is kind of a key ingredient there, to pause and reflect, and you're like, wait a minute, this takes so much of my time. What was it? Where was it going before? And that realization kind of helps open your eyes, but it's the forcing function. And maybe there's a similarity with the forcing function of having kids to the forcing function of hitting rock bottom, where it kind of forces you to make a change in direction, potentially. It brings those things to the forefront, at least, to where you maybe, again, it's a little force multiplier for, do I need to make myself more aware of something different? And it does have parallels with business. And the people that I talk to, I don't generally get into coaching people about their addictions or anything like that. I'm not a therapist. I don't have that, other than my own like checkered colored past that I can get into, but I don't have the credentials to kind of go through the recovery process with someone. But when I get into things with entrepreneurs and founders, there is typically some of those same traits that you're talking about now, where they're always super busy. They're really stretched to the capacity, to the end. Mm-hmm. And it's usually another forcing function comes in. It could be revenue, it could be employees, it could be just lack of time. They're just at their wits' end. There's something that's kind of like the straw that's breaking the camel's back. And that's one place that we often start, is looking at their time, because especially if somebody's been in business for 10, 15, or 20 years, there's so many bad unconscious habits that they're just outside of awareness. So to them, they got to get up and check their emails first, because shit's going to be on fire by the time they get to their email, And so they don't even recognize that there's an alternative to that. Right. There's different ways to approach that. And maybe there's even things to prevent that. So it's just stimulus, response, conditioned all the way through. That's just a path we don't ever consider. But when I can get a founder to start looking and tracking some of their time for where this goes, and they jump into email for the first 30 minutes of the day, then they go do X, Y, or Z, then they come back, and it's usually around lunch where they check it again, and then it's 2:00, and then it's 6:00, and then it's at 9:00. When they look at that on a piece of paper and say, oh my gosh, I spend like 4 hours in email every day.
Yeah.
Well, could we get somebody else to do that? Well, no. I got to handle that. If I didn't handle that. And so that's where you kind of start breaking down some of the beliefs, but it's that kicks the door open with the realization that 3 or 4 hours in a day, we're talking about 25, 30 hours in a week. That's all you're doing, is you're responding to whatever comes into your world, and you're keeping the wheels on the bus, and you got an income coming in, and you're covering payroll most of the time. But I mean, maybe if that's where we should start to address things. So getting into that awareness is the first step, and then helping people see that usually when they've reached that ceiling, there's a capacity limit that they run into. They often will turn to, well, I need to hire people. I got to look at somebody else. I've found that most people hire out of order when they start doing that. As entrepreneurs, we're problem solvers. You probably remember the MacGyver TV show, where the guy could fix anything with a stick of gum and a paperclip and a little this much duct tape. And that's what entrepreneurs seem to do with everything. So when they run into this problem that they need to solve. They're good at solving that, but they go to this like sexy romantic solution. Like, I need an operator to my visionary, I need the unicorn that's going to come in and save the day. So they hire a COO or they hire somebody up in management, and they haven't learned how to get out of their email for 4 hours a day, So there's some basic stuff that tends to keep tripping them up. And then the COO that ends up not working out costs them $12,000 a month for the last 6 months. So now there's less money and resources to actually solve other problems. So it's a bad cycle that if we can disrupt it again, and there are some parallels back to that addiction cycle with the amount of resources, time, energy, and money that is going into the improper maintenance, or the maintenance of improper or ill-advised activities. And when we can shift and redeploy, it starts to make a big difference. And that's what I try to focus on is quick wins, because I know the feeling of momentum that comes with the quick win of, again, this whole, 3/4, 7/8 of my thoughts were consumed around when I could do the next drug, how I could get the next supply, how I can do it without her finding out or not in front of the kids, or that everything went through that filter so much of the time. And when that went away, there were a lot of quick wins that started stacking up really quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. So many things to talk about in there. Cause I think that a couple of things stood out to me. One, I think it's probably not everybody, but I believe most people have some addiction, right? Like often it might manifest itself as drugs, alcohol, might be work. It might be
chocolate cake.
Right.
Whatever.
Yeah. It might be. Yeah. Mine is cookies. I like cookies. Like, it's like you eat, I don't want to eat one cookie. That's just not, it's a hard thing for me to do that. So but I think like ultimately that is, and so you use the example about, kind of checking emails and the amount of time that's spent there. And I think and I do that sometimes. And I think I was trying to think about like, why do I do that? Like there's sort of two reasons. One, I don't like my phone to have the little notification numbers. Like I'm like, that means I have things to do. And so like we have actually, and I think when you're checking emails and you get those, the numbers gone, or you don't have all these unread emails, it almost feels like a win. Like not unlike eating that cookie and then another cookie, like,
exactly right.
It tastes really good. So it gives you that
there's a cycle.
Yeah.
There's a dopamine rush, right?
Right.
And so there's the numbers, the notifications. Like my wife and I, she did it last night. She grabbed her phone, looked at something, and then went, wait, why did I get my phone? I'm like, don't you hate that shit? Like it hijacks your attention.
Yeah.
Because the last app you were on is the one it opens up to. And if it was Instagram, you're smart.
Yeah. Right. You're done for the next 20 minutes. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. But there is that dopamine cycle, Jason, and that's what I like to get into, because even if it's not the number that you're trying to make go down to zero, and here's the worst one, when the founders that are always trapped and they're the bottleneck and everything has to run through me. I hear these things a lot, right? Mm-hmm. The people that we work with, but they're building that into how they respond. So when they have to be the one that responds, there's a little bit of a Superman feel that you get with that, right. Throw the cape on and like, here I go again. Only I can do this. Yeah. And then at the end of the day, you're like, well, at least I kicked ass on that stuff that only I could do. It's like, well, you probably could have had somebody else take out the garbage for $20 an hour. It's not that big of a task that you wasted your time doing. So,
yeah. Yeah. And I think it's often talked about, as an entrepreneur, business owner, that you should spend your time on the like highest dollar, highest value, like where your time is most valuable, which is true. But I actually think sometimes that's hard to figure out. Like, and so because it might be hard to figure out, and the reality is some of those high dollar, high value activities that you would be doing don't actually show up as money right away. So you're like, well, if I have to hire someone to do these low dollar value things, but I could do them, it like the thinking around that, I think often becomes just maybe it's from a scarcity mindset instead of abundance or what, but it's like yes, you can hire an assistant, and you talked about sort of the hiring tiers, like the steps, the order. You want an assistant. You can tell me what you think, but like the assistant that can check those emails for you, do all of that stuff, like the simple stuff is often a good starting point, where you, as you said, like maybe not the operator or the COO or what it depends. That's like comes, a little bit later in the hierarchy of hiring. So it's just it is an interesting thing that I find it's hard for people to actually sometimes know what their high value activities are and like define that. So I mean, how do you see that with other people? How do you approach it? Kind of what's the way to define those things?
Yeah, I think I would approach it a little bit differently depending on what stage of the business somebody's in. If they're 6, 7, 8 months in and they're just feeling the initial pangs of growth, that first stretch. So let's use cookies because we both are fans of cookies. Okay, so if somebody makes a really good cookie and they hear over and over from their friends and neighbors and everything like, hey, you should sell these. These are so good. People would pay for this. And finally that person decides, everybody's telling me this. I'm going to do it. I'm going to just go out and do it. If that's initially, they start making cookies, they're in the kitchen, they got the apron on, they're focused. The problems they're solving usually have to deal with flour, sugar, the temperature of the oven. You know what I mean? Like that's their zone. That's where their expertise is. That's what they probably get a little bit of satisfaction being there, kind of lights them up a bit. And it's just their natural environment. So I'd say they should stay in that lane. But now once they've gotten to the point where they're just no more time, they're spending 12 hours a day in the kitchen, they're starting to feel a little bit taxed, a little wrecked, stretched a little too thin, they will often jump into trying to get somebody else to make the cookies. And that's the wrong move. That's akin to hiring the manager or the operator or the COO, where they're taking the thing that they are known for. When people say, oh yeah, Jim, he is the best cookie maker, then Jim shouldn't delegate making cookies until the very last step, when he's gotten really good at delegating everything else. Yeah. And part of that delegating process is being able to inspect what you're expecting from other people. So what Jim should do in that scenario, in my opinion, is he should start with an assistant, because how many of those hours of the 12 or 16 hour days that he's now working with this sweet cookie business that's like blowing up, how many of them are scheduling deliveries for somebody? How many of them are running out front to check out a customer, or if it's a retail location, or how many of them are anything that's not in the kitchen in his sweet spot? Okay. Now he shouldn't delegate marketing, shouldn't delegate sales. He should delegate everything else first. And so if there are emails that are taking up some of his time, I would start there. And that's often, in Jim's case, in our fictitious character here, usually the biggest hurdle there, Jason, is they don't know what they would give them. So they start thinking, and this is where the romanticizing part comes in of almost every entrepreneur. They start thinking like, okay, I need help. What would I have them do? And they start looking around and they're not really sure. And then they start to create this picture of like, well, if somebody could just come in and take over everything in the kitchen, that would be amazing. And they start to really get this fantasy baked up in their brain. And that's what they end up going out and acting on. Instead, it's a discipline. Like you got to climb this process in a disciplined way. And if you start with an assistant, and that's I don't know if anybody listening is facing or feeling any of these constraints right now. If you don't know what you would have an assistant do, just DM me EA playbook and I'll send you mine. I mean, I have a 25-page Google Doc that my assistant operates out of every single day, and you can have it. Yeah. Literally, you could hire somebody, hand them that document, say, read this, come back tomorrow, and they'd hit the ground running. It'd be 80% done for you, just like that. So that's usually the big obstacle, is they just don't know where to begin. But by starting at the lower level of what I call the delegation pyramid, priority pyramid, the lowest levels, like building a house, you start on the ground, the foundation, you get time, you get energy and resources back on your calendar, right? If you drop the scheduling, if you drop the invoicing, if you drop the delivery runs that you make, and you have somebody else helping you with this stuff, you stay in your sweet spot. So those are levers that you're pulling that have a higher impact on the business, back to your question.
Yeah.
Whereas the delivery, yeah, somebody could screw that up. But if they did, you send out another delivery. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that big of a deal. But if somebody screws up your cookies and everybody's delivery sucks, your business now has a consequence to pay back, and it may not bounce back from that. So you start on that lower level. It gives you time to continue to grow your business, but it also starts to give you some delegation chops, right? You're now practicing. You're now going through things that have a little lower barrier or a price tag, I guess, if they go wrong. And you can afford a few mistakes down there, which teaches you how to delegate effectively, how to document processes. So those are things that kind of build that foundation that then you can start climbing up your pyramid and building it up and up and up higher.
Yeah. Makes so much sense. I get the other thing I would maybe add to that is that most of the time entrepreneurs start a business in something that they are passionate about. They enjoy, like, again, take this cookie example, right? Like Jim was making cookies because he liked to make cookies, and then sort of accidentally started a business, which I think happens a lot. Like, people just start doing a thing because they like it, and they're like, oh, I'll do this. And then suddenly it's like, oh, I'm pretty good at this and people like it. Maybe I can make some money doing it. And that part's fun and like exciting. And then at some point it becomes an actual business. And you have to take on, if you don't do this delegation step, you're taking on all of these other things that weren't why you started making cookies. You didn't start making cookies so that you could package them up and make invoices and deliver them and have a P&L. Like cookies and P&Ls don't go together. That's not, but a business does. And so I think that's like probably would people realizing that, like, what, maybe you find your high value activities by the things that made you start the business in the first place, like the things that made you do this. And now it became a business, and you need people that know that piece of the puzzle. Like it's just kind of I think, it more often than not, we get to a certain point where we can have that business, be that entrepreneur to a level kind of on our own, like the solopreneur model. And maybe that makes you enough money to have, be comfortable and whatnot. But like, there's different things have to happen to scale it beyond that. And so that's when you have to really decide, like, probably about that point where you stop enjoying it is where that you're at that inflection point. But I would say you ideally start thinking about it before you get to that point where you don't enjoy it anymore, and really approach it.
Yeah, you usually need that forcing function that we were talking about before. Yeah. But if you can identify that that's coming, absolutely, you can start ahead of that. And I think you're spot on with the thing that you're passionate about, the thing that kind of lights you up, gives you, you're in your sweet spot. You're kind of, you get in the zone. You can flow. If somebody really loves making cookies, they could probably stay in the kitchen and they come up with new recipes and they're throwing flour around, and it's like they're just having a good time. But that's the capacity ceiling. When the business demands more than just a really good recipe now, because you have 2 or 3 employees and you maybe hired them out of order, maybe not, but even if you didn't, you have human resources to manage. And if you have 2 or 3 employees, well, you have to file 941 returns with the IRS every month or every quarter. What cycle are you on? But depends on your revenue. And then all these, like, how do I know? How do I keep track of that? Those are all things that are nowhere near the kitchen and the recipes. And that's what starts to stress people out. And that, coming back to this feedback loop, the dopamine cycle, sometimes to think about, do I need to go learn how to be an accountant? Just scares the hell out of an entrepreneur, because usually numbers and entrepreneurs, they don't really go well together, in the beginning, at least, for sure. So that idea seems so perplexing and so outside of their reach. And then I'm just doing this because I like cookies, man. That's all. Yeah. And then we have this idea. And so we get like the email thing is a payoff that we get. And that keeps us so busy that we don't really have to confront or face learning what a 941 federal tax return is and how often it needs to be filed. And so I've had clients that have just outright ignored them, and just haven't filed them until the IRS shows up and says, you owe all this money in back payroll taxes that you haven't been submitting. So it can get really ugly, and there are forcing functions out there in the world that will help you to see this, but you can start ahead of time. And if you start, a better way to do it, I would say, Jason, is just to kind of figure out what your hourly rate is. And this is what I did with one of my clients. I'm thinking of two actually recent ones. Sarah was a woman that we worked with, and she had 7 employees plus herself and was always doing everything. And she felt like, I can't let somebody go even though they're not doing their job because their family relies on me. So she really had that compassionate side of her. But in order for her to see the truth of what tasks she shouldn't do, we brought her revenue into the equation. We just did some calculations like, here's your revenue, here's what your expenses are, here's what your gross margins are. So your rate, if you're working 40 or 50 hours a week, and it was around $400 an hour. And she just didn't, it took her a minute for that just to sink in. So when you're spending all this time cleaning the office on a Friday evening, you're literally going around and vacuuming and you're taking garbages out. Like, you can hire a janitor for $25 an hour and they're going to do a better job than you. They're going to be grateful for the work. You're going to be out of here enjoying dinner with somebody else out on the town, like blowing off some steam instead of stuck here bitching about how you're the only one that'll stick around and vacuum. And the lights started to go off. And with her, it was just immediately within the next 90 days, 3 people that were total dead weight were gone. The other people realized that there's opportunity now to grow, and there's this whole new system because she was just, if it was under $200-300 an hour that she could put a price tag on, it's like, oh, I'm not doing that. I can spend. And then her time now went into sales and business development, which brought her rate even higher. And she started getting people courting her to buy her business after that because it wasn't chaos. It was actually built on some systems. And then Joel is kind of the same concept, but more of that scarcity mindset that you mentioned, and he just couldn't get his head around the fact that he could afford to delegate the work. And then he was in software development. So every time things got stressful, he'd just go back and I'm going to write more code. I'm going to work more hours and I'm going to do more coding and I'm going to do this because that was his sweet spot. And it is where he got a good ROI on time, but that's where he was tricked, because he kept thinking, okay, I can get a high ROI, but when he would bring somebody in, he would bring in a project manager, he'd bring in sales or something that he didn't like to do, but still kept all client relationships, invoicing, all those basic administrative things he didn't want to let go of because he thought if I bring in another project lead, they'll be able to bill their time and it won't cost me any money. So it was always, how much is it going to cost me? Yeah. And instead he started to recognize, wait, I can get 20 hours a week back with this little stuff, which means I have 20 more hours a week that I can land 1 new client a week. I could code 5 hours of those weeks. And then I could spend 10 hours of the week actually learning how to be a better leader of these people and building me so that I can grow my company. And so that's often what people miss is if you want to scale, if you want to go outside that solopreneur, and there's definitely a good path inside of the solopreneur world, and you can just bring in a VA or something to help you scale a little, but you kind of keep it nice and quaint. But if you want to scale, then you have to start developing skills that are outside of the thing that was your passion project that got you started to begin with. And I would caution people, just because maybe it's numbers, like that was my Achilles heel. And I have another terrible story that just run me through the ringer of millions of dollars just taken from me because I left that area was just a blind spot to me. I didn't like it. It wasn't where it's not my happy place. And so someone come in and just leveraged that and took it all from me. But you don't have to be you don't need a master's degree in accounting to just start getting a little bit better with your numbers, learning what P&Ls mean and how to read them and how to have somebody help you interpret them into data points that make sense for you so that you can start growing your business. So little by little, but you need some time, and you need maybe to get out of your emails or whatever other habits you might have that are keeping you from it.
Yeah. And you mentioned that the using some of that time freed up to become a better leader. And I think that that's like a very missed, I guess, skill set in entrepreneurship, because you're a lot of times, like, in the beginning, you're just leading you, and you're like, whatever, I don't need to be a great leader to lead me. I just have to do the work. And
I know this guy.
Right.
Yeah.
We've hung out before, but you have like this, again, like if you want to get to the point where you have, scale. I think oftentimes we say, do you want to scale? And it means, I need to have a, multi-billion-dollar company and hundreds of employees. And like scaling from solopreneur to having 3 or 5 employees is different. That's a different business. Mm-hmm. That is actually a sellable business. Like if it's just you, you can't really sell it.
Yep.
You have 5 employees, you can sell it. So it's, I think that the part about leadership, and you mentioned this too, like you don't have to become an accountant, but you should know what to look at on your P&L to affect positive change in the business. And like looking at it again, like, okay, I have some, hire a bookkeeper, hire your accountant, like don't be those people, but you need to know a little bit about that space. Like I'm going through this now where it's like, I'm trying to do better with marketing, like digital marketing and Google ads and stuff like that. And like, I know zero about it. Like I know zero, and I've hired someone who knows about it, but I don't know enough even to like check what they're saying. So I'm like, I gotta spend some time at least understanding the lingo and how it works, and then I can let someone else do it, as long as I can be familiar enough to check the metrics that it's working. And ultimately that's where you need to be, is to be able to understand if the people that you're paying to do things for you are doing it effectively. Like that, I think that's the level of understanding that you really need to have. That doesn't mean you're a CPA. It doesn't mean you're a marketer. Like it means you understand enough to know that those people are doing what they're supposed to do, and having the results you want. And if you aren't, what changes to make?
Yep, absolutely. And that makes me think of, I don't know if you've heard of the theory of constraints. It was talked about in a book called The Goal, and it's one of 2 or 3 books that Jeff Bezos requires all of his leadership people to read. The theory of constraints states that you focus on the area where the business is the most bottlenecked. So I love it because it cuts through. You take somebody that's 4 hours a day in their email and you say, really? Like, is that your priority? And you focus on what that, so in your case, if marketing is the constraint, like if email was, and it's like you as the founder just can't let go of things, we start there. That's the constraint. And then the next thing might be, well, marketing. We don't have enough leads. We don't have enough opportunities. So we got to figure out marketing. So now you solved the first problem. The leader, you've gotten some of your time and resources back. So now you can deploy those resources into marketing. And that's so stay there, live there, hire the team, hire the agency. And not just like, okay, take care of it. You hire them, and you are now spending those 5, 6, 7 hours a week learning about what they're doing, making sure that they did this was the result, measuring the inputs against the outputs, knowing enough about it that you can create a process around it and systematize that. And once you can do that, you'll find that if you've solved that problem, you will see your business has a new constraint. It might be sales. So you got to go jump into sales. It might be customer fulfillment, because now all these opportunities are turning into deals you need to now bring across into the customer success team or whatever. You're always going to have something that is constraining the business. But, it's like if you're building automobiles or something in a factory and you can produce 5 sets of wheels every day, 4 engines every day, and only 1 chassis a day, don't focus on building more wheels. Don't spend time in the wheel department, right? Those guys are doing okay.
Right.
Put your energy into the chassis, because if your income is based on how many vehicles you could sell, your constraint is in chassis. So focus all the energy there, leaving the other two departments alone for now. But now if you get chassis to 7, our constraint is now engines. So that's where we go. The engine block department is where we need to go spend time. And it just keeps cycling through. But now you've unblocked that constraint, and now you're selling 7 cars a day instead of 1 car a day. What could you do with 7 times the revenue in that little example? And that's looking at it like that makes it more of a puzzle instead of these big problems. And so founders often, I love that concept, the theory of constraints, because it just helps you stay fluid with it. Like, oh, I'm going to solve this, and then tomorrow, who knows? I'm going to solve that. I don't know what it'll even be yet until we solve this one. Then we'll see what our weakest link or our constraints are, and we'll just figure it out as we go. So it keeps that dynamic rolling.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, the cliche is you're only as strong as your weakest link, but I think most cliches are cliches because they're true, basically.
True, yeah.
They get overused, but in a lot of instances they're quite true. And so I think that's a incredible example. Justin, this is a fascinating conversation, but I know at some point we'll both have other things to do today. So I want to switch gears and make sure I get to ask you the questions I ask every guest. The first one is just related to the name of the show, being Know Your Why. So what is your why? What's driving you? We got to hear a lot about your story and your background, and I appreciate you sharing all that with us. But kind of at this point in your career, life, whatever, what is your why?
Yeah, I really feel like I'm one of those more stubborn humans, I think, and those forcing functions that I've talked about is because I've had to face them like at the lowest points, whether it's facing prison, potentially because of a drug arrest, or 2, actually, I had 2 within 2 months. And then 5 or 6 years later, a partner that took millions of dollars in falsified tax returns and grossly understated revenue that I had to fight through that. Like, I've had to hit these points that really is like, come on, why didn't you do something a little sooner than this before you got to this point? And so that's what I feel is my why now. Like and there's kind of 2 fronts to that. There's the addiction and the sometimes hopeless feeling that can bring. Like, I just want to help people understand that there are people out there whose life work is to help you understand why you do what you do and how to change from the stimulus to the response. You can build a better process in the middle there. And it's not as bad as you think it is, but you'll be hard pressed to do it on your own. So if I can help people with that, that's one area I really feel strongly about. And the other is just, again, in business and in building a business, you don't have to wait until your partner steals everything. You don't have to wait until the IRS is down your throat. You just need to learn how those theories of constraints work and recognize that often just with a little guidance and outside input or a different point of view, you realize, oh, okay, I'm just going to redeploy. So there's similar concepts that come from both of these major chapters of my life I just don't want people to have to feel the same painful lessons that I've listen to my story and then make a little bit of a course correction and see if you can find just a little bit more joy and a little less pain as a result.
Yeah, no, that's great. I hope that happens. I hope that people listen, whether it's this podcast or other podcasts, and you can listen to other people's challenges and actually act on that. Whether it's advice or just like a story that resonates with you. I do hope that happens. I try to use that, every guest I get to, whatever experience, knowledge, even on the challenge side, that I can kind of glean from that and learn something and apply it to my life. I try to do that. So I hope that happens. Well, when people hear this and they want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to reach?
Probably just through any of the socials, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, Twitter. We're on all of them. It's Justin Lund across all of those.
Okay.
And I'd love to connect with you and hear from you. And, like I said, if there's any of the playbooks or the processes that we use with that we've built in our own business, or we've in the hundreds of other businesses that we've consulted and coached. Like, I'm happy to share anything that maybe your constraint, that maybe a playbook or a method that's already been tested. Try that. Don't just start from ground zero. So yeah, come over and connect. We're always trying to put out content that speaks to the challenges that entrepreneurs are facing day to day.
Yeah, no, it's great. We'll make sure that's in the show notes, but it sounds like it should be fairly easy when it's consistent across platforms. So, well, Justin, this was great. I love this conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. Thank you for sharing everything that you did. I think a lot for people to learn and be inspired by. So thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's been great. Thanks, Jason.
And folks listening, make sure you connect with Justin. Please like, rate, and review the show so we can continue to get great guests. And as always, thank you for listening.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?